Hello friends, Clage back with another video today, and we're going to do something a little different today. I often get asked for tips on improvement, and not just specifically like improving with Anji or tech for Anji, stuff like that. I mean general basic improvement at Guilty Gear and just fighting games as a whole. So I want to start this video by just asking you a basic question. When you're playing a fighting game, we'll just choose Guilty Gear because that's what most of you are here for, but when you're playing Guilty Gear, what part of the screen are you looking at? Think about that for a couple minutes if you need to. Pause the video if you need to. That's totally fine. So, why am I asking you, what are you looking at on the screen? This seems really vague and silly, right? So, back when I was struggling through a character change with Vanilla Accent Core, where I was not very happy with some major nerfs to Anji, and just did not really vibe with the changes they gave him. I was trying out some other characters, trying to find a new main and all that good stuff. And I was kind of struggling with that, and my buddy AKA, who I played Guilty Gear a lot with during the XX era and was probably like my main sparring partner and someone I talked to all the time and learned a lot from, at one point just asked me, what are you looking at while we're playing? And it kind of caught me off guard, and I took a minute, and before I could even really give much of a good answer, he followed up with, you're mostly watching your own character, yeah? And yeah, bingo, guilty as charged. I'm playing a new character. I'm constantly looking at what I'm doing on the screen, trying to get my movement down, trying to use my pokes properly, all that good stuff. Yeah, I'm staring at my character because I have to know what I'm doing, right? I want to know what's going on and how to use these buttons and this movement and get my confirms and all that good stuff. Now, at first you might think, well, duh, of course you look at your own character. Like, I have to position myself. I've got to confirm my hits. I've got to be able to move around. And this is all very true. This is very important. Understanding your movement, watching, yourself relative to things on the screen, that's very important. You're not going to be able to play a fighting game without looking at your own character. That would be a weird, silly provision to put on yourself that would not do you any good in the long run. But what I'm trying to say is that while it's true that you're going to be looking at your character and you're going to be cognizant of what you yourself are doing with your character, whether it's movement or poking or anything else, there's a big difference between looking at your character and knowing your character's position. And I'm not just talking about your physical position on the screen. I'm not just saying, oh, my position right now is on the ground kind of close to the corner, or my position is round start mid-screen. No. I'm talking about position in regards to your opponent. How far away am I from Soul right now? What are our movement options? Where am I on the screen? How close am I to the corner? What is their position? What is our neutral game looking at right now? Do Soul's pokes outrange mine at the moment? Like, is his far S going to beat my far S given where we are on the screen? Stuff like that. I'm also talking about your position in regards to the game state. Are you currently on the offensive and applying pressure or hitting a combo? Are you on the defensive and being rushed down and threatened to be grabbed? Stuff like that. What's the position of all your resources? How much burst gauge do you have, especially now for stuff like Wild Shell or Deflect Shield? How much tension do you have available to possibly use a Roman cancel, whether it be in neutral or a confirm or anything like that? What's the life situation? Do you have a life lead? Are you playing at a drastic life deficit? All of these things are what I mean when I say knowing your character's position. And I know that's a lot to keep track of. That is one of the biggest challenges of fighting games. There's a lot of information on your screen, and it's constantly changing. It changes all the time. And something that's very common these days is all of this stuff about keeping track of things, keeping track of your character, keeping track of their character, keeping track of your gauges, keeping track of positionals, keeping track of how much resources you have available. This tends to get lumped into discussions about the mental stack, quote unquote. And the mental stack is a very important part of any competitive game, especially fighting games. I've talked about it in videos before. I've used it to explain why certain mix-ups work, why certain mix-ups don't work, all sorts of things like that. But the mental stack has also kind of become a buzzword amongst people either posting in Discords or creating guides or whatnot to describe why anyone is struggling with some aspect of a current fighting game. Reacting to your opponent's decisions, blocking mix-ups, teching throws, etc. You hear it discussed constantly with regards to dealing with throw loops and corner drive impact right now in Street Fighter 6 is a prime example of this. So, where am I going with all this? Right now, instead of talking about the mental stack, I want to focus on what your goal should be for improving with playing the character you've picked up. Whether you are new to a game and you're trying out characters and getting used to them for the first time, whether you're trying out a new character in Season 3 like Johnny or one of the characters that's been pretty overhauled with their changes in this new season, I want to give you a goal that can drastically improve your overall play. And that is, I want you to be able to aim for being able to watch everything else on the screen besides your character. At least until your character becomes the focal point of an interaction. And what I mean by that is you should aim to be comfortable enough with all aspects of your character. Your movement. What kind of air dash do you have? How good is it? How well can it get you in? How good is your back dash? How well can you evade attacks? How good is your ground dash? Or do you have a fast character? Are they a little bit more on the sluggish side? What are your movement options? Your poking. How good are your pokes? What's your best long-range poke? What are your most rewarding pokes? Do you get big counter hits off some of your pokes? How do they interact with other characters' pokes? You know, forward punch has a lot of upper body invulnerability. Knowing situations where that's really good is something you want to just have be a part of something you already know and don't have to think about. Spacing. How does your character want to space against your opponent's kit? If I'm playing playing against bad guy, something I need to be aware of is stuff like Fafnir or Fares. These long-range threatening options that can be confirmed into big damage. What kind of space do I want to play in that given matchup? How do I get to the space that best sets up my character for success? Other aspects that you want to get completely comfortable with your character. Confirms. If you hit Fares with Anji, you want to be able to constantly confirm that into Fujin. If you hit with Crouching S, you want to be able to constantly confirm that into Stand Heavy and get a combo. Your basic confirms are super important. You want those to be automatic. So all of these things are things you should be comfortable enough with your character that you should not have to have your visual focus be upon them unless something comes up with an interaction where you need visual cues. Say if you have a combo that requires a spacing visual or a timing visual or anything that helps you better hit that combo consistently. That's a time where, yes, your eyes should probably go back to your character. You should take in your visual cue. Right now, hitting that combo is the most important thing you can do, even though there's going to be other things that demand your attention. For example, does your opponent have burst on deck? Should you be looking to possibly bait a burst? Just a good example there. Your eyes should be constantly taking in all the other information on the screen aside from your character, unless one of those interactions where they demand your visual attention comes up. Now, whether you're starting out as a new player or even a veteran player who's learning a new character or a new game for that matter, this isn't something you're going to be able to do immediately. You're not going to pick up a brand new character and be able to go, all right, I'm going to just let things happen automatically because I know what I want to do, and I'm going to focus on all the other things I need to focus on the screen. No, that's not realistic. Don't try to run before you crawl. Like, that's not going to do you any good. A lot of your mental energy when you're first learning a character is going to be expended remembering basic things. What poke is what? Which one is the poke I want for a given situation? If you haven't had a lot of interactions with different characters when you're playing against them and you're learning a new character, you're not going to know what poke works well at a given situation or what poke beats what all the time because you just haven't had that many situations come up where you've gotten to test that. Same thing with, like, you're going to be spending a lot of your mental energy hitting your basic combos and confirms. Until your combos become automatic and you know exactly what starter gives you what and what combo route you want to use and how you're going to best get the most out of your damage, you're going to have to think about that. You're probably going to have to watch your character and really stare and go, okay, it's slash, then heavy slash, then special move, and then I can air dash or stuff like that. Your mental acuity is going to be assigned to doing those things because they aren't automatic when you first pick up a character. And that is perfectly okay. You're going to be spending a lot of mental energy on stuff like, how do I apply pressure? What are my plus frame moves? What do I do if I get them to block a plus frame move? All of this stuff is going to be using a lot of your mental energy, and because of that, your visual focus is going to be more on a lot of things you yourself are doing as opposed to what your opponent is doing and as opposed to other vital information on the screen. And that's fine. That's completely natural for all these situations that your vision, your focal point is going to be on your character. That's perfectly normal. The end goal of this is that let's talk about the things you aren't looking at when you have to tunnel your vision onto your own character and give a lot of your mental energy to just doing basic stuff while you're learning a new character. Well, what are you not looking at? What are you not taking in as you focus on your own character? Well, for one, you're not focusing on your opponent. You aren't focusing on their movements, their tendencies. Do they like to air dash in a lot? Are they being very calculated and careful with their pokes? Are they playing kind of hesitant and waiting for you to make the first move? Are they trying to play a more defensive style? Are they being a mad foaming mouth dog and rushing you down at all times? These are things that when you start getting hit by them, you'll probably take notice, but right off the bat, you're not focusing on these things. You are not focusing on what your opponent's doing. You're not taking in their play style, and you're not giving yourself mental notes about this is what my opponent is trying to do to beat me, to outplay me. That's one of the major things you're not looking at. Another thing you're not looking at, or at least not very often, your resource bars. How much tension do you have? How much burst do you have? Burst now is more important than ever because of these new mechanics that use burst. They're very powerful. You're going to be using these mechanics as you get more comfortable with the character. But do you have the burst meter to do it? Did you just do a long combo that ended up using two wild assaults? Well, now you have no burst meter. Are you aware of that? Do you know that's going on? What about the life totals? Have you taken off a chunk? Is your opponent in a range where your next confirm could close out the round? Are you at a range where if you get hit, your opponent's going to be close out the round, and now you have to make a decision of, do I want to try and burst out of a combo if I have burst on deck? Do I know if I have burst on deck? All the resource gauges going on the screen are things that you're not going to be looking at very often while you are focusing on playing your character at base level and putting your eyeballs on your character. Another thing you're not looking at while you're tunnel visioning on your character. Screen position. Where is the screen position? All of it. Are you playing at distance? Or do you want to be playing at distance against the character? If that's Axel over there instead of Soul, am I happy about this screen position right now? Probably not. But are you thinking about that if you're only looking at your character? How close are you to the corner? Are you on the verge of cornering yourself? Are you giving yourself less real estate to work with? What about your opponent? Are they trying to gain more control over the screen and push you into the corner? Are they moving away because they don't like the situation? Maybe you have too many resources and they're trying to pick their spot carefully, or they're looking to interrupt you being overly aggressive. These are things you are just not looking at. So, this isn't to say you won't ever look or take note of these things while you're first learning a character, but how astutely you're keeping track of all of them is going to be much, much, much lower than if you are intimately familiar with your character's options, how they play, and how to pilot them. Fighting games are a super unique competitive game in the fact that their game state changes multiple times over the course of seconds. And that's not to say there aren't other competitive games that have that same thing, but fighting games, it's almost a constant. The game state right now at round start is completely different if both characters just backdash. Backdash takes 20 frames. That's a third of a second, and now the game state has completely changed. Now no one, except for super long-range characters, is in a great poking situation. If you don't have a projectile, now your odds of your abilities to threaten your opponent with any kind of offensive option are very low, which means the game state is drastically changed. The second someone air dashes in, the game state is changed again. The second someone blocks or puts someone under pressure, the game state changed again. This is something that you're going to have to deal with and adjust to constantly because it's always happening. And the more that you conceptualizing what the game state is or where it's about to go becomes automatic, the better you're going to be able to find yourself applying your game plan and be having chances to put a pressure on your opponent. Now, this is all obvious, right? Like, this is all bare bones, basically. Like, well, duh, Glage, of course, if I am more comfortable with my character and know what I'm doing, well, obviously, I'm going to be able to pay more attention to the game state. I know this is really obvious. But again, we're talking about vision. What are you looking at on the screen? So I'm going to go back to that original talking point where people ask me for advice for how to improve at a base level, not just how do I get better with Anji or how do I get better at Guilty Gear. You're going to get a lot of common answers from people when this question is posed. People are going to tell you, go lab your combos. Make sure you always hit your combos, get all your big confirms, blah, 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 stuff like that. Work on your pressure. What kind of block strings do you have? What's dash cancelable? How do you use your plus frames? Do you have a good strike throw game off any given thing? Grind out your movement, your execution. Can you hit your instant air dash into an option? Can you dash break to? Apparently, I can't. To stop your opponent from using long range attacks to keep you out. Can you dash break into a throw to mix your opponent? Grind out these things. People will tell you to review your matches and look for flaws that you have, or look at how you're playing the neutral game and try and improve. And these are all great things to improve upon. I'm not saying you shouldn't consider these things as things to work on and things you should improve. They're all key components of getting better at a fighting game. But I'm giving this spiel to you about visual focus because it's something that's often overlooked. And in addition, improving those skills that I just talked about, your combos, your pressure, your movement, your execution, all of these are going to make it much more natural for you to improve your visual acuity when you're playing a match. As you gain familiarity with your character and you get more comfortable, you're going to stop needing to allot as much mental energy to watching yourself and looking at, all right, I'm backdashing, I'm poking with far S, I'm poking with stand heavy. I'm going to avoid a projectile. I'm going to try an anti-air. Eventually, you won't need to allot all your mental energy to staring at you, yourself, and what you are doing. Once you reach this point, this is where you can start improving your skills at looking all the key things you should be keeping track of as a match goes on. So, let's give like a basic example here, right? So I am obviously very familiar with Anji and very familiar with, say, the range on his pokes, right? Like, I know that far S range at the tip is about there. Like, I know how to get to this range. I know what I'm looking for. I know that a key range for Anji is to be at the tip of Crouching S right now. Crouching S is a super good poke. It converts into stand heavy if you're just a little past tip range, which can give you big confirms. It's a low. This is a money zone for Anji. Being near the tip range of Crouch S is a very good place to be, right? I know that Fujin Uncharged goes about this far. I know if I'm willing to charge Fujin, I can reach further. So I can look at my spacing relative to my opponent, or watch my opponent and see they're about to enter the space where, okay, you're probably going to end up right around where Fujin ends. I'm going to go ahead and throw Fujin out. That sort of thing. When I'm maneuvering to find these ranges, I'm not staring at Anji. I'm not staring at my character and going, okay, there it is. That's how far 2S goes. No. I am looking at the entire screen. I am watching Soul move around and pick his spots. Is he playing neutral? Is he jumping in? Is he throwing Gunflame? Is he waiting me out? Is he trying to outpoke me? I'm watching him and basing my decisions off what I'm seeing him do and figuring out the tendencies of my opponent so I can best determine that, okay, it's time for me to try and get in the money range. This is a good game state for me to go, all right, we're going to try and go get a confirm here. I'm not staring at Anji. My eyeballs are constantly looking at everything. My opponent's character, how they're moving, my position relative to their character, and when I get a chance, I'm glancing at the gauges and seeing what the game state is with regards to resources on both sides. If there's a low risk point, say we both back off a little bit. Maybe we both decide to disengage and dare the other one to come in, or we're going to try and zone out for a little bit. That is a perfect opportunity for me to really take in all the resource bars, for my eyes to glance down, see how much tension we have. Glance up, how much burst do we both have? Is anyone coming off blocking a lot of moves and has a cranked risk gauge? Like, if we're in a low risk situation for me, then my eyes are naturally going to do a quick glance around and take in all the resource bars. And this is the kind of thing where you probably already do this to some extent, but how often you do it and how well you're doing it is something that's super, super easy to overlook, which is why I'm yammering about this point of what are you looking at on your screen for over 20 minutes now. So you almost certainly do these kind of instinctive checks yourself, even if you're still new. A perfect example of one is if you get a starter. Let's say Soul, let's just have him, let's see. I'm going to have you, yeah, okay. Let's just have you, Fafnir. Like, let's say Soul whiffs something, right? That's perfect, Bandit. Something like that. And you're going to get your starter. You're like, okay, cool, I have a close S starter. This is my money starter. That's what I want. Even if you're new to a character, if you know you've started your juicy combo, I guarantee you that instinctively, as soon as you start this combo, you're going to glance down at your tension gauge, and you're going to see if you have the meter to Roman cancel or the meter to tack on an overdrive at the end. So if you get something like this, you can go, oh man, I have meter. I'm going to go ahead and use that because I want to get more damage right now. I want to cash out as much as I possibly can. Oh man, I have more meter. I could do Isaogi at the end to break the wall and get a hard knockdown. I am positive you do this on your own instinctively. If I could put an eye tracker on you and watch you eye track your match, without question, that's something you're going to do without even thinking about it. And that's good. That is like the bare bones beginner aspect of this idea of your visual focal point that I'm talking about. So, when you start getting to the point where you get to the range that you can just do all your combos via muscle memory. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to add any visual cues. You don't have to worry about it. I hit close S. I'm going to do my big damage starter because I know we're this far from the wall, and I'm going to be able to either take a wall break or I'm going to earn the corner, depending on the situation and what I want. Like, that's a thing I'm going to be able to do, right? That's something that you're going to be able to constantly look at all those gauges, constantly look and double check the spacing of, am I going to take them to the wall or not? When you're still new, when you're still having to kind of use a lot of your mental ability to remember how your combo route works, you're not doing these basic checks near as often. Those things get pushed to the back burner. And that's something that makes it harder to improve in the long run because, again, you're still focusing on you. You're not focusing on your opponent. And if you're not focusing on your opponent, that makes it much harder to succeed at a fighting game all the time. So, start asking yourself after matches as you get more and more familiar with a character, as you play more, as you feel yourself improving, or maybe you feel yourself hitting a wall. Ask yourself, was I watching my opponent more than I'm watching myself? Am I paying attention to what Soul Bad Guy is doing as we play a round of Guilty Gear more often than I am staring at my Anji and hoping that I got to 2S range? Or trying to see if there's enough room for me to sneak in a butterfly to control space, or guessing with Ko. Anything. Am I watching my opponent's character? Am I picking up their habits? Am I picking up the idea of how they're trying to execute their game plan? How often am I glancing at the resource bars? Am I seeing if I have enough to do a Roman cancel? Am I constantly aware of, oh boy, Wild Assault is back on deck? That gives me a lot more options. If you're not, ask yourself, was there a time where I lost track of important information? Was it because I was too focused on my own character? Or was it a situation where my opponent got to me and put me under duress, where I'm put under pressure and now I'm having to focus on playing defense and I have to, put a lot of my mental ability into my decision making while I'm on defense? That's okay. Don't feel like if you're trying to do this thing I'm talking about and improve your visual focus, that it has to be every moment of every match. No, there's going to be points where if you get knocked down in the corner and your opponent gets to play Oki on you, you need to be focusing on what's going on there. You need to be looking and go, okay, what are my options? How do I try and get out of this situation? Being in the corner is difficult. Being under pressure is difficult. That's my focal point now. That's fine. This isn't me telling you must always be looking at the entire screen and taking in every... No, that's not the point here. So I don't want people to overreact and think that I'm telling you should never focus on a single point of the screen. But if you did lose track of stuff, if you did lose track of how much resources you had, maybe you thought you had enough burst left to do a wild assault, to extend up, your pressure or a combo, but you actually didn't. You didn't actually glance up at the gauge. You just thought maybe you'd recovered enough. Why did that happen? Is it because you're focused on yourself, or was it just a scramble situation and you're just kind of doing something instinctively? That's going to happen. Mistakes are going to happen. Sometimes those mistakes are going to happen because your visual focus isn't where it needs to be. Sometimes it's going to be because your opponent forced an error on you. So ask yourself these questions more often. It's not something you think about. It's not something that you really are putting at the forefront of, man, I'm trying to get better at Guilty Gear. Let me think about what I'm looking at. Like, I get it. That's not a question most people are ever going to ask themselves, and it's totally understandable why. I'm not going to promise you this is going to drastically improve your play, but it's something that's really easy to just not think about or remotely consider, because once you start feeling much more comfortable with your character and your gameplay, a lot of this becomes automatic. One of your main goals at improving is getting better at piloting your character. So if you get yourself to a point where your movement, your neutral decisions, your pokes, your confirms, your pressure, all those things start becoming second nature, at that point, you can really start using a lot of that mental stack everyone loves to talk about for finer details, and use that mental stack for something like, I don't know, watching your opponent and making your decisions based on the information that you get by watching them and picking out their tendencies. So yeah, very simple question. I know I yammered on for almost 30 minutes because that's what I do in videos. Have you ever watched this channel? Very simple premise. What are you looking at? What are you looking at on the screen? Ask yourself this more often. You might find that this flips a light switch for something that is giving you difficulty that you didn't even realize was a problem in your gameplay. See if you can start being more focused on your opponent than yourself. Again, if you're just starting out, if you're brand new to a character or brand new to a game, that's not possible. You're going to have to get familiar with your character. You're going to have to get to where a lot of the basics are second nature. But once you've reached that point, once you feel comfortable with doing the basics, you have a game plan, you understand pokes, you understand confirms, start asking yourself more often, what am I looking at? Am I focusing on the right things while I'm playing a match? So, let me know if this helps you out. I'm genuinely curious. This is something I've been thinking about a lot as I come back to Strive, because I definitely noticed when I first started playing again how much I was having to just kind of focus on Anji and focus on myself to make sure, like, okay, this route still works here, I think, and I think I've hit the wall this many times, so let's try and do this juggle with this timing. I was doing a lot of that and not near as much of what is my opponent trying to enact for a game plan? What are their tendencies? And as I'm getting more comfortable with this game again, I'm finding myself paying a lot more attention. You noticed in that Ramlethal set I posted yesterday, I baited quite a few bursts. I'm doing that because now I'm taking more time and more cognizant effort to go, oh, I'm comboing them and they have burst. I should probably pick a point that's a common burst point and see if I can bait them into using it. So yeah, let me know if this helps you out at all. Is this something you've ever even considered? Is it something you're willing to practice and learn? Do you want a more in-depth explanation on some aspect of this? Let me know. hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you think. Genuinely curious to see if this is something anyone cares about, or if you all just kind of look at me and go, Clage, why'd you talk about this for 30 minutes? Which is entirely possible. Not every idea for a here's something you can do better at fighting games turns out to be worth the effort. But I do genuinely think this is important, and I think it's something that, while it doesn't make you instantly like, yes, now I'm going to be able to fight everyone in Celestial, it's something you can improve upon. And anything you can improve upon while being aware it's something worth your time is something worth considering, at least in my opinion. So anyway, that's all I got for today. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Let me know what you think. As always, thanks for all the likes, subs, comments. I really appreciate all the interaction, appreciate all the support. Thank you to all of you who've checked out the Patreon and signed up there. Again, I'm working on the Wild Assault guide now. I'm almost finished with the scripting, so that's going to be the first video where I put Patreon credits and all that good stuff in. So if that's a perk you've been looking forward to, stick with me. Hoping to have that video out in the next couple weeks or so. We'll see how long it takes me to actually record and edit, because I'm a baby mode editor. I really don't know what I'm doing, so it's going to be an adventure. But as always, thank you so much for all of that, and that's all I got. So yeah, be safe, be good to each other, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace for now.